Bienvenue, welcome to our live stream. As the keener-eyed of you will notice Chris Gilsenan, still looking as shell-shocked as you were before, and I'll explain why that is in a second. But welcome, Chris, from Root Home, of course. A man who spends most of his life dealing in the social housing market as a developer. And we'll talk more about that in a second. I was looking for topics that we could talk about today. We could talk about Ashworth's Law, a way of ensuring that nobody else has to die from mold in unkempt and unkept social housing. We could have talked about all number of other things. And then Chris dropped the bomb that, in fact, he'd done more effective transactions. Well, it's not really a transaction. Is it completely their transactions? More
sales. Let's call it sales.
Sales in 1 week than perhaps, well, the previous month or the previous rest of the year.
Yeah, we've sold about five or six deals in the last couple of days.
Wow.
Which is normally about a month's worth of transactions. So yeah, it's just escalating and escalating at the moment.
If anybody remembers the conversation I had with Chris last week, he was bemoaning the fact that he was in that really weird situation of having too many deals and not enough people to close the deals with, because he was looking for people to jump into bed and with finance and then suddenly the opposite happens, if one can term it that way, and which is the reason why Chris looks like he's a little bit shell-shocked. But then he tells me, of course, what you must remember is these projects are by no means complete. Right, Chris?
It's true, yeah. There's so many variables involved. So you asked me just a moment ago how long it takes to monetize, how long it takes for cash to come into the business. But it's normally a staged process. It can take up to 6 months potentially. So we normally get paid in 3 different tranches. So if we're selling deals on to other buyers, so if we're charging a sourcing fee, we don't get paid until the deal exchanges.
Right.
And there's loads of stuff that can go wrong between placing a deal and it going through the legal process.
So there's a lot of moving parts in this, right? As you said,
there's so many variables that are outside of our control. So when we get surveys that come back in, it could be that actually the house is an absolute disaster, and we may need to go back to the vendor and just point out 1 or 2 things. And
has that happened before?
Oh, I've got 2 on my desk right now that's going to happen with. So yeah, that could pull the rug from under our feet very quickly.
Have you already expended money and time and effort and energy on these?
Yep. Oh yeah. Legals are part way through. Searches are done. Obviously, the cost for the surveys, you're into the tune of at least 2 or 3K already on these transactions.
And so you almost like a lost leader. You're shoving the money up front. You're doing all the bits you should do. How come? Forgive me. I'm a well-groomed idiot. So look, how come is now $2,000 in effort, time, energy, and money been put into this thing, and it's only now that you realise that it could be an absolute disaster?
Because it's a great question, to be honest with you.
Sorry, I just said I'm an idiot. But I'm just saying from my side of things, it's a bit like buying a car from the showroom. It's secondhand, but it's from a registered dealer, and they've gone through it with their 48-point thingy-bob, and you're driving home, and suddenly the wheel falls off.
Yeah. No, I get it. So you've got to rely on your professional advisors and just assess the situation. So you wouldn't, unless you knew what you were looking for, you wouldn't necessarily buy a car without having someone inspect it. This is exactly the same in the world of property. There are just lots of moving parts and things trying to happen at the same time to accelerate and expedite a process. So that's why we're so far into that process, and things can then come up. There are ways of mitigating it. You could run things sequentially, so one thing after the next, after the next, after the next. But that slows down your window of time to getting projects completed.
Yes.
So
you could run groups of things. You could segment into separate groups that they themselves run in parallel with other groups, which will then keep the speed up, but then might mitigate your your expenditure of time and energy and money. I mean, if I can drill down a little bit, can you give me an example without obviously putting names in the frame?
There's like I said, there's a risk reward element to it. So 9 times out of 10, what normally happens is you go and have a conversation after shit hits the fan, and you need to go and kind of regroup and have a conversation with the vendor. But one of the variables that is very much outside of your control is how's the vendor going to react? What are they going to do? What's their position? What's their motivation in the first place for having the house on the market? What price points do they need to be hitting? How indebted are they, and how much cash do they need to clear? Have they already mentally spent the cash that they've already, because they've got that sale agreed? And then you're coming back and asking for a reduction on that price. What's the impact of that? So loads of variables outside of your control. It's one of the reasons that we do hire and pay well an external surveyor who's RICS qualified, they're third party. They don't owe any allegiance to us as such, other than us paying their bill, but they have a very strict code of conduct they have to follow. So really what they're saying, it is third party, independent and completely professional advice, which their professional indemnity will back them on. So when we put a report under the vendor saying, well, actually your roof's about to fall off, then we can have a further conversation around the additional costs and whether they'd like to repair that, or ideally, which like.
So is that referencing one of the ones that are on your desk at the moment? Is part of the house about to slough off in a stiff breeze?
There's a few holes in one of the roofs, yeah.
A few holes, as in no floor.
Both externally and internally, there's a few issues.
But we've only just had the surveyor's report.
Only just had 2 survey reports come back in this morning. And they're in a bit of a state, a bit more than we expected them to be.
But you didn't. I mean, forgive me, but shouldn't they have been done at the beginning?
Well, you're still incurring the cost. Again, it's your process. So
but you've done legals and all the rest of it. So you've already incurred £2,000 cost, according to you, this far, and then you've got the surveyors coming, which also has a cost to it. And you found that this thing isn't really a house; it's more of a leaky sieve.
It goes back to the risk reward and what's the likelihood that we can get the vendor back to the table? What's the likelihood that we have already negotiated or estimated a buffer into what we think the cost of works is going to be in the schedule of works? What's the variance that this is going to push us over, or by how much over? There's lots of elements that we could do it in like I say, that sequential basis where we go and get the survey done and then we get a quotation, which is before we've even secured the property. But then we're also running the risk of, well, we might lose the deal to somebody else coming and purchasing the property.
Right.
So the faster I can get that transaction into legals and have effectively the marketing, not the marketing halted, but the marketing, any online marketing listed as subject to contract, and all the viewings then halted, which will then have a knock-on effect of halting any further offers, apart from people who've already viewed that property. It puts me in a stronger position to know that I can complete on that property.
Forgive me,
down to me.
This is probably obvious to everybody out there in property land, but to me, it just seems crazy that you've already spent all this time and effort. What you're doing is trying to lock out your competition. Yeah. So therefore, you've got focus on it, and only then do you work out whether it's a lemon or a piece of floor tile. You know.
And obviously, I will always work with our own team, but also our clients, and explain that situation to them, because the flip side of it is either it goes the wrong way and they end up buying a lemon, or you could effectively draw a line under the sunk cost and say, well, okay, we'll just write that off against as a tax loss, move on to the next project, and then we can have a further conversation about the next project, what that looks like, and if that client wants to reshape any of the internal processes, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I think we've honed our processes to a point that, I think our results are kind of demonstrating the fact that the process is working at the moment based on the throughput of transactions that we're doing. I did mention to you off air as well that we'd normally expect between about 1 in 4 to 1 in 6 transactions to fall out of bed. Since the start of this year, we've had none fall out of bed.
I wish you would stop saying that. You put the mockers on it. That's crazy though, because in previous years it's been 1 in 4. That's 25% of all transactions fail. Well, so far in 6 months, that's not been the case.
No.
Probably kind of bucking that trend.
Yeah, like I say, there are variables outside of our control, and there are variables inside our control. So it's kind of spotting the ones that we can adapt, changing our process.
So, I mean, at any one time, how many different properties have you got going through this process? Because you could pull out of this at some point. You'd have lost the money you spent up front. Your two. So you just say about $2,000 to get to that point.
Yeah, around about that.
All right. So you're gambling with $2,000 on each one, aren't you?
Not quite.
Well, what I'm saying is you've got upfront costs of that before you even find out whether it's a lemon or not.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But what you're assuming, I don't like the word assumption, what you're banking on is your years of experience and the team that you built around you will have steered you in the direction of a wholesome property that will be sufficient for your clients' needs, that will work out, that will be profitable, and that you can then start the next part of the process. And then 6 months later, you might get a payment.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I mean, the only way that we get paid is on exchange of contracts. So we are completely exposed until that happens. So we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that does happen.
I'm really surprised you've got as much hair as you do, and that it's the color that it is, because frankly, this sounds a lot of scariness.
I think we just got a lot of experience now. We've been doing this for quite some time. We've got a number of transactions under our belt, and most of the time we get it right. And when we get it wrong, we'll own it. We'll hold our hands up to it, and then also work towards a resolution and try and figure out what the best way forward is. These two that we're going to have to go back and have a conversation with the vendors and the agents. I'm not overly concerned about. I am aware that we have overestimated in terms of the cost, so there is enough fat in the budget to accommodate some extra challenges.
So there's a question I didn't ask, which really adds to this. So you could go back to the seller and say, "We found out that you have no flaws, but we are able to put those flaws in. Therefore, to make it profitable for us, we need you to drop your asking price by X amount."
Yeah, we would absolutely do that.
That's the next part of that process, right?
So yeah, what we do off the back of we always get the contractors to provide a contracting quotation off the back of both the survey, and then from the survey we will develop our final schedule of works, collaborating with the contractor. Then we get the contractor's quote, including the price for any additional work. We will then go back to the table, back to the vendor or the agent, and just have a further conversation with everything that we need to say, well, this is where it's at the moment. Feel free to go get your own quotations, but this is where our contractors' quotations are coming in. We would like a reduction of X. We would prefer to do the work ourselves, because then we can validate that it's done to the standards that we expect.
And this is a normal part of that sort of negotiation process? Yeah,
it's pretty common. Yeah.
So disappointing, but at the same point retrievable.
Oh, it's very retrievable. I see a lot of. I spend a little bit of time. Sad to say, but on Reddit, looking at some of the property channels, and certainly some of the first-time buyers, they're like, "I've had a survey come back and it's spotted this, this, and this. And what do I do?" It's fairly straightforward. You just go and ask for a reduction.
That's the thing. I think I don't know with this English people, but I think they're a little bit scared of going back and saying, "Well, actually, we say it was going to be X amount. We want X minus 20,000 because."
Yeah, we're certainly. we're not into haggling very much, are we? So yeah.
No. As a culture, I love haggling. You see, famously, I've haggled at Tesco's and managed to get a reduction. Yeah, but the point is, when I haggle in front of my wife, she gets tremendously embarrassed. She would rather pay over the odds than have to go back and ask for a reduction, even if it's warranted.
Yes, I have one.
And I don't think she's alone. I think she's the norm. So, yes. but what you're doing is not like a straight haggle. Well, I don't want to pay that. I want to pay this figure. It's more of like, in order to make it work for us as a project. Yeah.
I mean, our offers, they're normally, we will place our offer based on our estimation of what we think the work is going to entail. And then we will then place a value on what we think we can pay for the house and it still be commercially viable for us. If it turns out that actually our estimations are wildly inaccurate, or there's a variance beyond where we'd expect them to be, yeah, we're absolutely going to go back and have that further conversation with the owner and say, actually, this independent third-party guy over here has spotted a few things that we didn't spot when we were viewing your house. They're clearly a problem because he's got this massive 72-page report about it. So can we have another further discussion about the price, please? It's very, very fair, very reasonable.
So, guys, I hope you've seen a little bit more of a window into some of the process that Chris goes through, the multiple plate spinning and the juggling, and that has to go on. And that even at the point of purchase, there's still a lot of jiggery and pokery that has to happen before he's going to get a return on that investment. And because necessarily you're doing multiple ones of these at the same time, even though you've had your Bonanza and you've had a bunch of these come in, we're still 6 months away from having said that was a good deal. We did well there. Was that a fair estimation?
Oh, absolutely. There's a massive lag, and all sorts of things can go wrong. Thankfully, we're expecting things to go wrong, and we're there to catch it when they do.
I hope you see from this, guys, that Chris is a different kind of breed. We're not talking about the whack 'em in, slam 'em home, and rip the profit out and then run on to the next deal. It's about getting it so it's the right deal for the right purpose, and it comes out with the right standard of finish. It all has to be right. Is that right? I mean, that's your focus, isn't it?
Yeah, trying to get it right first time as well. So yeah, minimize the amount of time that contractors are on site, because again, those cause delays.
I think that's going to be the summary of today's session. It's about trying to get it right first time. I think if more people took that attitude, we'd probably have a better and more logical property market. All right. So once again, thanks, Chris, for helping out here. See, a property bonanza is just the start of the process. Thank you, Chris, once again, for a window into the. I don't think I'd want to do this. I've often been slightly envious of the work you do, Chris, because it sounds like it would produce a lot of satisfaction. But now it sounds like it's full of stress as well. But still, it seems like they've built a formula over many years, and it still seems to be working. Thanks once again, Chris. And out there, if you want us to talk about other topics or have comments, please don't hesitate to come forward. Tell me or Chris. You can find us both on LinkedIn. And until next time we speak, have yourselves a lovely weekend and look after that mental health. Bye-bye.